Thank you, Brian. Who else was over there playing with you? I just feel so blessed to be embraced and inspired by this energy and the talent that's within this community. It really feels so special. So, thank you. So, 33 years ago, my life just fell apart. I was always a very spiritual person, but I didn't have a spiritual practice, which I think led to the falling apart. But I was always focused on personal development. And after a couple of years of being in the desert, as I call it, when you just kind of isolate, I decided to do something about personal development, and my brother and I started a consulting business. And it was called Business Works. And one of our taglines was, work less, make more money. And one of the products that we offered as an entree into the corporate world was called Effective Time Management. Imagine that, as if you could. But we knew that, if we could focus on changing behavior, then we could be very effective. And so in addition to it being an 8-week course that gave us time to really focus on behavior, we also had a daily planner. This is back before, our phones and everything else. I think the Palm Pilot and BlackBerry were just starting to emerge, but really weren't widely used because they were really expensive back then. So our focus was on doing this behavioral change, and we were extremely effective. We could show a return on investment for what was bringing the people in and investing in them. And if you were in a corporation, you probably saw guys like us that were doing that. But the challenge was this, is that even though we had 10, 15, and if we did the course over and over again, we could have 30 or 40 different people, depending on the size of the organization. Those people would be very effective in wanting to do what they had learned, but the culture didn't support it. The culture didn't support it. For a lot of reasons. I remember one client, I went in trying to work with them, and I would meet sometimes individually with people, and this person had instant messaging on their computer. This is before, BlackBerry and that stuff. Instant messaging on the computer. They had their personal phone. They had their business phone. They had their door to their office open all the time. And the speed of the CEO was just get it done. And so trying to make a change in that kind of culture just wasn't going to work. Because the idea of socially sanctioned workaholism, right? That's the only addiction that's really socially sanctioned, is workaholism, at least in this culture. And that can take a tremendous toll, but focusing on the bottom line was really the area of focus. My son went to work with Blue Origin, which is the company that sent William Shatner into space. And when he was reading the description of the company, they said work-life balance is very important. And this is what happens. We have individual values and beliefs, and then we have behavior. And the behavior in the company, now that he's been there for almost a year, is long hours. He's an engineer, so that's what engineers do, is they have a deadline and everything is focused on getting the deadline accomplished. And so there's a gap, a dissonance between what we say we value and what our behaviors are. And so that creates a lot of creative tension within us. So the focus on cultural change is what I changed to, because the skills development really wasn't happening in terms of changing culture. So I had to address cultural change, which is guided by vision, driven by values, and really focusing on what that delivers. So, of course, you teach what you need to learn, and trying to be, at that time, my wife and I were leading a center in Central Florida. We did that for 26 years together. So, raising a kid, being a co-pastor, a husband, a father, a lover, and a consultant was a lot to do. And so my wife, Reverend Kath, would ask me very often, how's it going? And, I'd take a big deep breath and I'd say, I just need another day. And that's the title of my talk today. I just need another day. And she'd be very kind and she'd say, well, you want to talk about it? And sometimes I would, and I would just do this blurt, this download of, well, this is what's happening, blah, blah. And she was patient. She would say, you want to go for a walk? And so to bring into my awareness that I needed to rest from this push by myself to get stuff done. And I can never thank her enough for having the patience with me to be mindful enough to try and get me, focused on what really matters. So I think that this work-life balance thing is there for me to learn. And I've learned a lot of tools to help me with it, but I'm not there yet. And I still think that I just need another day will end up being on my tombstone. So the question is, what do we do to refresh, restore, re-energize, all of that stuff? The culture is not going to change. And maybe that's a good thing, I don't know. But we need a conscious commitment to change. So defining what rest and relaxation and restoration really means, I think, is pretty important. Now, pre-COVID, managing the chaos of a family was really a challenge, as many of you know. Post-COVID, I don't know how people do it. With working at home, kids at home, two people using the internet to have their own Zoom meetings while the kids are trying to learn on their own. I mean, you talk about chaos, I can't imagine anything more chaotic than that. And then you still have, soccer practice or whatever the practice is with the kids, still trying to shuffle them around. Just saying it all gets me exhausted. And that's your experience, is how do you find rest in all of that? Well, defining rest is important, as I said. And Kath and I, very early on in our relationship, came to the realization, among other things, that privacy was of paramount importance, finding a way to be by yourself. And the other piece of that was taking time away from each other. And that may seem like a paradox. You think when you rest, you want to be together. But we realized that the privacy and taking time apart was really important. In fact, to the point where Kath went on a medical mission to Africa just when Obama was elected, which was a life-changing experience for her to see people of color celebrating a black president. And it really, hit her heart. And in the meantime, I was home taking care of my consulting business, a 9-year-old, and a cat, and a church community. And I would do it again in a heartbeat because I know that she would do the same for me. So defining what rest is really important. But even when we're clear about what rest is, we still resist it. We still can't seem to find time. So Marjorie, on vacation, you're not allowed to bring your phone and texting and emailing and any of that. But isn't that what we do? I mean, we go on vacation. How often have you heard people say, they come back from vacation, they say, I'm exhausted. There's something in the culture that just says we don't have time to waste, we need to catch up, we need to get ahead, there's not enough time, not enough resources, not enough. And I think that is the most challenging thing that we deal with, is this sense of not enoughness in so many areas of our lives. Despite our science of mind principle that says there's always more than enough, right? But that gets drowned out by all the busyness, which causes us to hide from our feelings, hide from the work that we need to do, hide from conflict. We're too busy to work on relationships. We're too busy for difficult conversations or learning how to have difficult conversations. And we're too busy to devote time and effort to our inner life. And that's the culture. I think I have a slide that speaks to this. It's by Brené Brown. Let's see what it says. It takes courage to say yes to rest and play in a culture where exhaustion is seen as a status symbol. Exhaustion is seen as a status symbol. I'm not sure it's a status symbol, but whatever it is, it's socially sanctioned, that you work yourself to the bone. You know, it just seems that it fills our lives. As kids, you know, we were always trained to help out at home. And so, you know, that was a great discipline to learn. And as we got older, we would ask our mom if we could help. And she would always say one of two things: I'll rest when I'm dead, or I'll be dead for a long time. And so I guess I can justify, I just need another day, and blame her. Right? I mean, isn't that how things work? But you know, it's not just the greatest generation that was driving this accomplishment, because they were raised during the Depression. They had to try and make ends meet, and had this tremendous drive to survive. I mean, that's what it was, this drive to survive. So it's not just the greatest generation. I think it's deeply ingrained in Western culture. I mean, we all recognize that, but where did it come from? And maybe it went back before Western culture, but I know this for a fact, that, and you'll give me the answer to this, in the 18th century, the Puritans said, idle hands are... There you go. Any desire was reduced to that. You know, whatever you're doing is the devil's workshop. And so and I think part of it came from the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence was a shift in consciousness. It was a treatment, putting out there in creative self-expression or creative community expression, this idea of democracy. It's a huge deal, because it had never been done before in that way. Well, by 1803, that fledgling democracy was struggling tremendously. And in 1803, Thomas Jefferson and Napoleon Bonaparte got together for the Louisiana Purchase. So all of a sudden, this poor struggling nation with just, you know, the 13 original colonies had this huge tract of land added to the community. Napoleon went off to fight his war in Europe against the Holy Roman Empire and Russia and England and all of that. But in this country, it really shifted things to this concept of manifest destiny. Manifest destiny. Go west, young man. Take whatever you can grab, whatever the consequences, because it's your destiny to do so. Interesting, in 1802, 1803, Ralph Waldo Emerson was born, father of the Transcendental Movement, and Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, who was the teacher of Emma Curtis who's the Christian Science? Mary Baker Eddy. Isn't that interesting? At the same time this energetic thing was exploding, these two people were born, which was really the birth of the New Thought movement, which was all about personal empowerment, right? Interesting shift. Manifest destiny. And we're just starting to recognize the political, social, environmental impact of unconscious self-righteousness and self-expression, right? The consequences of that go west young man and the bodies that were left in the wake of all that. And the systemic things that were created back then out of this sense of personal empowerment. Interesting perspective. I know it's not what you may have thought about, but that's where it comes from. So it's an interesting history about the energy of self-empowerment, individually and collectively. And we know we're all supposed to rest, right? Take a deep breath, take care of ourselves. And most faith traditions call on a day of rest, a Sabbath, right, of some sort or another. But what happens on our Sabbath? We usually fill it with all sorts of activities, right? We got to keep going, got to get this done, got to experience that. And so the question is, do we really take time to rest? Corporations know that, corporate research tells us that rest increases productivity. And so they push for that, but they have a very different, they'll say, we want you to rest, but they'll drive you to workaholism. Doctors tell us that rest reduces stress and allows the body to heal. Artists say it connects them with creativity and problem solving. All evidence tells us that it brings greater health and well-being. It recharges us for the next phase of our lives. And it's still a challenge. And I think I have another slide by Thich Nhat Hanh that speaks to this. It's very important that we relearn the art of resting and relaxing. Not only does it prevent the onset of many illnesses that develop through chronic tension and worrying, it allows us to clear our minds, focus, and find creative solutions to problems. So we buy that, we know that that's true. But the concept of rest is hard to hold on to. And for people that have retired, rest might be defined very differently. In retirement, we don't necessarily need rest, we need activity. So maybe we need to redefine what rest means. What are we resting from? That might be a different way of looking at it. So maybe we need to rest from the news. Maybe we need to rest from social media. Maybe we need to rest from stimulants and alcohol and drugs. Maybe we need to rest from our sedentary lives. Motion is lotion. Have you ever heard that before? Motion is lotion. These bodies are meant to move. And if we're not moving them, rest might be moving them and allowing us to experience something different. And maybe we need to rest from the sacred cows of what you think you should be doing, having, and being. Because there's a lot of them out there. Sacred cows that we just assume. Here's a sign. The Hindus have stages of life, and maybe this idea of doing that kind of work is something that we can't do until we reach 40, 38. Well, that's when my life fell apart, everything happened then. And one of the reasons is the paradigms, the sacred cows of how you're supposed to live, everything just falls apart. That maybe those weren't true, and maybe they weren't my beliefs, but someone else's belief of how we should be. So I think that, we get to that place of questioning everything, and that's the opportunity to dive into that deeper life, where we can live in close connection with that deeper wisdom, that intuition, that still small voice, whatever it is. That's the opportunity. I think that maybe you can't get there till you've experienced not having it. I don't know. So you might say, Reverend John, that sounds really nice, but it seems like it's just another to-do thing on my list. So I'd like to invite you to, we're going to do a little exercise. I invite you to take a big deep breath and put one hand out like that and the other hand out. And just take another big deep breath. And think of all the things that you have, maybe all the things that you want in your right hand. And then in your left hand, think about all the things that there are to do today. All the things that are still to do. And then take a big deep breath and bring both of those hands over your heart. And that's what you want to be, is integrated in this moment with a deep breath. Telling ourselves that it is okay. Whatever our desiring nature is, all our job is to be in right relationship with all of it. And we can take another big deep breath. And from that place of beingness, we can simply let it all go and relax and bring our hands back down. You see, at some point, we've got to prioritize that our inner life is the only path to well-being and health. And the reason for that is, or one of the reasons is for that, is that there's no shortcut here to the constant cultural beat of good, better, best, never let it rest. When the good becomes the better becomes the best. That beat, that craving will never go away. And so the only thing that can help is the quality, the frequency of your spiritual practice. Now, I know I talk about that a lot. You can call it whatever you want. Sharpening the saw, that's what Stephen Covey calls it. He tells the story of watching the guy trying to chop down the tree, and he says, it might help if you sharpen the axe. And the guy says, shut up, I'm too busy, I'm making great progress. It's the same type of thing. What is the quality of our spiritual practice? What can we become by that inner work in terms of a healthier, happier life? And what we can become is restful. That's where the rest is. So the first step in developing a robust spiritual practice, at least in my opinion, is to develop the witness, develop the observer of watching where your thinking goes as you're in the midst of something. Now, some things are easier than others to watch. A good example is somebody cuts you off in traffic. What's your first response? I'll get this son of a gun. Or you box somebody out on the freeway, oh, it feels so good. I know these things because I've done them. And the reality is, okay, what am I thinking that would cause me to think I have an advantage in traffic by boxing the sucker out? That's all. You don't have to go to judgment. It's just like, wow, isn't that amazing that I'm thinking I'm going to get home any faster by doing this? But that awareness of watching your behavior and then the witness saying, really, do you really have that intention? Or you're in a grocery line that's not moving. That's my favorite one. And it's like, I got something to do, somewhere to be, and it's, okay, well, what are you going to do? Drop your groceries and walk out? I need the groceries, that's why I'm here. So what causes me to think that there's any advantage in my impatience? But if I'm not challenging myself by becoming aware, all I'll do is get rude to the cashier when I get up there, right? And that's not fair to anybody. But it takes that awareness. So I'm going to give you a real, more difficult challenge. I call it safe passage. Start with those that are really close to you and ask yourself, can I give this person safe passage through my mind? So I start with Reverend Kath, and maybe she left dishes in the sink. And so, can I give safe passage? Or am I going to start telling a story? Oh, she just expects me to do them, right? You see how this spiritual practice can cut short all of those stories. After you go with the person that's closest to you, start expanding out. I think of my son. He's 24 years old, has a great job, and he spends money like it's... So, do I give him safe passage through my mind, or do I create a story about irresponsibility and youth and all of that stuff? It's easy to do, right? And maybe there's a good rationale for it. And maybe I'll think of what I really need to say to him. But if I can create safe passage for his activities through my mind, the likelihood of me giving him good advice improves, rather than taking him to task for my story about who he is. Is this making sense? So after your immediate family, start working on maybe your significant other's family. That could be a little bit more challenging. Can we give them safe passage? And for my family, it's pretty good. For Kath's family, that's a spiritual practice. With her family, therein lies my path to God. And then you start moving it out. Can you give safe passage for a homeless person? Theoretically, it's pretty easy, but I don't want them sleeping on my doorstep. So can I go there in terms of thinking about safe passage? Well, let's really challenge you now. Safe passage for the president. Can we give safe passage to the president? That may be more difficult. And here's the real kicker. Can you give safe passage to Vladimir Putin? Wow, that's a lot, isn't it? But that's a spiritual practice. I like this exercise because listening first to the observer, to my own mind, making up stories about why this person doesn't deserve safe passage, prevents me from opening my mouth and proving that I don't deserve safe passage. You with me? And so that leads us to the second step of practice, which is get thee to a practitioner. If I can't grant safe passage, then I need to affirm that there is something within me that does know how to do it. And if I can't do that on my own, then I need to get a practitioner that can help me to do that. You borrow the consciousness of a practitioner that knows better about who you have come here to be and can recognize that unity, that oneness, that beauty, that power that's within you. That's the role of the practitioner. When we can't see it ourselves, when I can't give safe passage, then I need help. The next step is to move your feet, right? Treat and move your feet. But what I mean by that is stand up and change your consciousness, your emotions, your feelings, your thoughts, and maybe even physically where you're standing. Stop watching the freaking news. That's moving your feet, right? Or whatever it is for you, is you've got to shift. And that movement Spiritual mind treatment is a movement of mind, right? A movement of mind from a place that's uncomfortable to a place of feeling better. Abraham Hicks says the same thing. Find out what you can do to feel better. Go for a walk. Take someone to lunch. Make amends to someone. Give $5 to a homeless person. Change where you're standing. I do love my Catholic upbringing for some things, and one of them is the saying that avoid the near temptation of sin, right? Don't surround yourself with the news, with social media and all of that stuff. Avoid the near occasion, because I know when I'm there, I'll miss the mark, right? I'll move into this place where no one gets safe passage. Do I have an opinion about everybody? Yes, I do. And I've got to be able to breathe and change and avoid the near occasion of sin if I'm serious about feeling better, feeling happier, and achieving some form of life-work balance. It's harder to do than it is to talk about it. And perhaps the hardest place to give safe passage, hardest person to give safe passage to is yourself. Is there ever an inner critic? How many stories does that critic tell about your past? Because they know you better than anyone else. How often do we hold on to our values and beliefs, and the inner critic is there to jump the first chance that you're sitting on the couch eating Cheetos? It's right there. Well, you say you want a healthier life, and look at you now. Your fingers are all stained orange. So the inner critic can have a field day with us. And I learned early on when looking at beliefs and values and looking at the behavior, to give myself a break and give up one or the other, right? If I believe I should be eating healthier and I'm not, then stop believing that it's important to eat healthier. Now, I'm not saying it is. What I'm saying is stop beating ourselves up for behaving a certain way. It means you're not ready to do that. Maybe you need to learn something about yourself before you set yourself up to fail. And the question is, whose values and beliefs are they anyway? That's all the shoulds. You should be eating healthier. You should get exercise. You should be doing this and that and the other thing. So we got to make sure that those values are really ours, because otherwise we make ourselves crazy, right? So that's part of giving safe passage to yourself through your own mind. I know it sounds kind of schizophrenic, but that's what we need to do. So here's the thing. The constant craving, the busyness, the information overload is not going away in the foreseeable future, as far as I can tell, and maybe it shouldn't. But we say we want to create a world that works for all. And clearly we can't do it on our own. We can't. For a lot of reasons. Because the pressure of the culture is so insistent. We say if it's to be, it's up to me, and we've proven that that doesn't work, right? So maybe we need to change that to, if it's to be, it's up to us. To come together in community, to support each other in community, to move beyond this intolerance of intolerance, this divisiveness that's been created, and recognize that we're gazing into the mirror, and that perhaps our experience can help someone, and even not our experience, but our open heart and compassion can provide a safe place for a person to feel that they can be who they are. This is huge for any community. In order for us to evolve to the next stage of consciousness, we've got to move beyond this idea that it's up to me to do it, but instead rely on a community that is healthy. As Marjorie said, the title in my workshop, Being in Thriving Community, we can't grow a community, but what we know is a thriving organism naturally grows. And so if we can create a thriving community, it will naturally grow. But that requires all of us to make that commitment for that to happen, of learning the skills and learning what we need to do to make a safe, sacred place for each and every person that walks into here. And I'm going to show some examples in my workshop about that. And I know, to some extent this is kind of heavy for a Sunday morning, but I can't help it. That's just who I've come here to be. I've had a career of focusing on personal development and organizational development and what it really takes to do that. And it takes a lot more than we can ever imagine. But that's okay, because we have a safe, loving community for us to do that. And it's the only path that I know of to health and well-being and rest and all of that stuff. So if it's up to all of us as community, we've got to create that place of safety, trust, compassion, gratitude, extraordinary respect. We've talked about that all the time. And we've got to commit to learning that and mastering it to some extent so that this sacred space can be held strong no matter what circumstance blows through, right? No matter what the situation is, no matter whether a minister comes and leaves again, this community is self-directed and can hold the center strong. It's a critical competency that I think every community needs to master, because we're talking about spiritual living. What is spiritual living? It isn't something that we do on our own. We do it in community. And so health and well-being become a natural consequence of being in spiritual community. So as we do that, we can rest in the knowledge that in the knowledge that when we see the light go on in somebody's eyes, it's because their heart has been lifted. And we can rest in the experience of knowing that we're doing everything that we can to create a world that works for all, where no child goes hungry, where no one feels unloved, and to use the P words, where prosperity and peace prevail. And so it is. Thank you.